Utah Utes 2026 recruiting class has the chance to be one of the best they've ever landed. We're going to tell you why on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our glorious friends at Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase today. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the former host of this show and one of, for my money, the best minds in the state when it comes to breaking down football, and analyst for KSL Sports Rewind, Bryan Brown. Bryan, really appreciate you coming on. And I want to talk about this 2026 class because, simply put, I do think it has Utah's 2026 class has the chance to be one of the best they ever landed, because the class of 2026 in the state of Utah is, simply put, one of the best we've ever seen.
It is, and it's not just depth in terms of the number of players, but it's also the level of talent at the top to bottom. The class is very impressive, and it's at a perfect time for the state of Utah in the sense that football is on the rise here.
Yes.
Not just Utah, the team that we don't talk about, team down south, they're on the rise too, much to the chagrin of Utah fans, but it's also at a critical point in this program's history or story. And that's important as well, because I think Utah's really trying to get on the map in terms of what happens in the future, and the high school recruiting is going to be a big part of that. And I also believe that this is just the beginning. I think the state, the programs within the state, and the level of talent is just going to continue to grow. So it's a great time to come on and talk about it, especially as Utah will start to wrap up the very end of their recruiting class in February this year for the 2025 cycle. But as you know, recruiting never stops. And so they're going to be right back at it, trying to get some of these guys to commit to the University of Utah.
Yeah, they had junior day just recently. So a bunch of these top guys we're going to be discussing were on campus. This recruiting class, when the first top 100 a couple years ago dropped for the class of 2026, Utah had 4 guys in the top 100 nationally. That's not something you usually see that early. We'll talk about a couple of these guys. Some of the, and what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to go back and forth. We're going to draft and be talking about our favorite players in this class that are currently uncommitted. Bryan, if you got a pitch on a guy that you think Utah could eventually lure away, I'm definitely down to hear it. But unfortunately, for my money, Bot Mulitalo is the best player in this class. He's committed to go to Oregon. I think that's going to be a tough sell for Utah to get back in the running in this one. So as I mentioned, we're going to go back and forth talking about our favorite guys in this class. Bryan, thought about letting you go first, but there's just one guy I really want to talk about. So being as it is my show, I'm going to cut you in line and take this one. And I got to talk about Brock Harris. This is a guy who for years we've seen the physical profile, 6'6", 238. He's a 4-star tight end, 45th ranked player in the nation, 5th at his position. He's a monster. And I think he has a chance to not just play on Saturdays, but of course, play on Sundays with that physical profile. You get him up at the U, I think he would have a chance to be the next great tight end with that catch radius, that size, speed, the athleticism. Brock's a special player.
He is a very special player, and I was waiting for the jingle to come in for the draft, but not surprising that he's at the top of your board. He's also at the top of my board. You mentioned Bot Mulitalo. I think it's between those two in terms of long-term, who's the better player. Jeff Hansen, also, of the other side, has called him a Ninja Turtle at times. But, Bot jumped on the scene about 2 years ago. It felt like you and I on our very last call together.
Yes.
One of his best games. The one thing about the Bot versus Brock conversation is I think it's a very similar conversation in the sense that they both jump out at you immediately. So yeah. I went to the UA Next camp, I want to say it was 2 years ago, and I was up above the stadium. So I didn't have a roster, I didn't know numbers, I didn't have anything like that. And there's just one player the entire time. I was like, who is this kid? Who is this kid? I got to find out who this kid is. He's enormous. He's athletic. He's fluid. He's catching everything that gets thrown to him. Sure enough, at the end of the day, I walked down there. I was like, oh, it's Brock Harris.
Yeah.
And so in terms of players that you want to prioritize, I think Utah's got a new system that they're integrating That doesn't mean that tight ends are going to get left out of it, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Carson Ryan transfers to the team down south because he's more of an inline tight end. Brock Harris is a move tight end. He's going to be able to sit at the line of scrimmage. He's going to be able to go in motion, like you said. I think he's the kind of talent where he can do a lot of different things. He can play more of a U back position or an H back. And who knows? Maybe you can even run him out of the backfield. Just a phenomenal player.
Yeah, one of the guys, I don't care what your offense is, you want this guy a part of it. And Brock Harris hopefully will be at Utah. So I took the first pick, and as you said, I stole your guy. So who are you going to take with your first pick now, Brian?
So now Bot Mulatalo off the board. Are we saying that?
I was saying Brock Harris off the board. Do you think Utah can get in on Bot? That's the reason Bot wasn't on mine. I don't see how he leaves Oregon to come to Utah. That's why I didn't bring him up yet.
So I think maybe we'll set that one aside, but I think that's a good conversation to have. Bot committed pretty early on to Oregon. Oregon's recruiting process right now is incredible.
Yes.
The organization they have within their collective, the funding of it, and it's not just like I think people always just say it's the money, but really it's the people that are running it for Oregon that are so well organized. They have everything accounted for. You don't see Oregon lose a lot of commitments to flips. So I think that is a tough one. But assuming, this was maybe a year ago, Bot would be my first selection. That being said, I'm going to go with Isan Tafa. And he may not be the best, most talented player in terms.
Committed to Washington right now, but he was at Utah's junior day. So that is worth noting.
He was, and he's a local kid, plays at Corner Canyon. Corner Canyon has been friendly to the University of Utah in years past. I'm picking him because not only do I think he's potentially available to be a Ute, but I also think he is really one of the best players in the state, talent-wise, and I think he's really going to hit his stride this year. He's played at Corner Canyon, so he has a lot of connections, a lot of ties with current Utah players up there. Played with Isaiah Garcia, for example. This is a young man that started early on for Corner Canyon at a program that is used to developing high-level offensive linemen. So Jackson Powers Johnson just go to the NFL, play for the Raiders. So that he has that kind of talent and ability. I think the big thing for him is that he's been through some personal stuff, some off the field issues, nothing negative, but just some stuff that I don't, he talks about it on his Twitter page. You can figure it out pretty easily. But I think that kind of thing, as you're progressing and going through this process, it can always be, a toss up in terms of your development, but athletically, the skills, the gifts, it's all there, the length, the ability to block. And he's playing for one of the best offensive line coaches at the high school level, in BJ Cavender. So he's a guy that I really like, both in potential for Utah to flip, but also I think they've prioritized him a lot more. You see Jim Harding really getting involved on that one. They've done a good job of really loading up the offensive line room. You see what Spencer Fano has done. There's a lot of reason to pitch that. I think they want to continue to build in the trenches. Utah does. So that's the reason that I picked Isan Tafa, but there is a ton of talent left on the board still.
He is the 10th ranked interior offensive lineman in the country. So it would be a massive get for Utah if they were able to bring him on, especially because their offensive line, they might be losing a lot a year from now. So he's a guy who would have a chance to come in and be an immediate starter like a Spencer Fano, as hard as that is to do your freshman year. They could really use Tafa. So hopefully he's a guy that they are able to flip. As you said, Brian, there is a lot of talent still on the board, and we have a lot more players to get to and discuss. We're going to keep this conversation rolling in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. The big game is finally here, and there is no place better to get tickets than with Game Time. And whether it's not even just Game Time, but if you're looking to tickets with your best big event, not just the Super Bowl, you can find it by looking at concert, comedy, and theater events near you. NBA, NHL, college basketball, Game Time has your backs. They have a great feature called Game Picks. The app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more shifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. There's also that last minute tickets. You get a seat view, so you know exactly what kind of a view you're going to be getting before you make your purchase. And the best part, it's all covered. Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellations options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Bryan Brown back with me talking all things 2026 recruiting. Each of a player taken off the board so far, but we have not taken 24/7's top prospect off the board in the state of Utah. And that's what I'm going to do here. Salesi Moa, the athlete at Fremont. I mean, incredibly versatile. You're talking about a guy who caught 57 passes, 823 yards, 11 touchdowns last season, while adding 30 tackles and an interception. So a true football player, 6'7", 175, top four. He's 39th ranked player in the nation. 6th best overall athlete. This is just, he's just a dude, Brian. I think he could shine on offense, and I think he could also play exceptionally well as a defensive back at Utah. Maybe with Utah, I'd probably play him at DB just because I know how good Morgan Scalley, Sharif Shaw, the coaching is there. Not saying anything about the offensive coaching there, but I know what those guys can get out of those players on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't think you can go wrong with a player of Moa's caliber. He's been on the scene for a while. He was originally a guy a couple years ago we thought was going to be a superstar receiver. So either spot you put him at, I think he's going to excel.
I do too. I think everything you talked about. I guess my question for you would be, what do you think? What is it about Moa that stands out to you that makes him a higher rated prospect than some of the others on the board?
So that's where I will agree. I was surprised that he is number one because I think as we both agree, Mulitalo won. I think I just look at this, the intangibles, the pass rushing ability that Mulitalo has, those speed, the traits. I think I'd have him one. Harris's size and speed, I just don't think you could teach that. But Moa to me would still be right there. Somewhere from 3 to 5. I think he is a guy who, because of his elite change of direction abilities, catch radius, still stands out. And
ability to go get balls, track balls, that kind of thing.
Maybe it's just the athleticism is what makes him stand out. How do you view Moa?
I think the athleticism is there. The bloodline is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brothers played at BYU. Isaiah, Ice, and I'm blanking on the older one's name right now, which happens as you get older. His father Ben played at the University of Utah. He started as a freshman at Weber, then transferred to Fremont. So I think there's a lot of that kind of thing. He's been so young. The athleticism is there. He's clearly got the genes and everything like that. I think to your point, it's about really setting himself apart in terms of, like that. I guess I don't want to compare him to Puka Nacua because I think they're very different players.
Mm-hmm.
But really defining what he is in terms of as a player at the next level. I think that to me is the intriguing part about him. Like you said, does he play safety? Does he play wide receiver? At 6'2", does he have enough of a frame to where you can maybe even put him at linebacker? There's a lot of those kinds of questions too. So that's my only reservation with him in terms of what's there. I think the athletic ability, you mentioned the change of direction. He is an explosive guy. He's really fast. He does stand out quite a bit in games, in terms of the athletic ability. And I think that really is probably why he's so highly rated, according to 24/7. But he would be a huge get for the University of Utah. There are just not a lot of skill guys in state that stay at Utah. And I think that would be a massive one for them to land.
It would be. So where are you going with pick number 2 for you, Bryan Brown?
This is a tough one because we're looking at the rankings on the board. There's still a lot of good players out there. This is a guy I got to see a lot last year. One of my favorite players. I'm going with Kale Akana.
Mm-hmm.
And Akana is a very versatile player. Plays safety, plays linebacker, plays wide receiver, plays running back. He punts, he kicks. He does everything for Orem. He is a super talented athlete, but the biggest thing about him, he's tough as nails, and that kid just loves football. There's another highly touted recruit on his team, Kai Wesley, 6'7", tight end prospect. He may be off the board at some point in time. Utah has gone after him super heavily, prioritized him. He's a tremendous athlete. But the difference in the investment, the effort, the energy, the level of play and production between Akana and Wesley is measurable. It's noticeable. And he just shows up everywhere on the field for Orem. And I think that kind of player excels at the University of Utah. Kind of reminds me of Cyrus Polu a little bit from this current class, in the sense that he can do so many things. It's about finding a fit for him in terms of position. I think his fit at the next level is probably on the defensive side of the ball. If that's the case, it's hard to bet against Utah.
It is very hard to bet against Utah. I mean, this is a guy, you mentioned future might be on the defensive side of the ball, but man, is he a heck of a receiver. Over 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns in his junior season, and can do a little bit of everything. If you're looking at 24/7 Sports' rankings, he is the 7th ranked player in the state of Utah. He's not ranked nationally. He's the 20th athlete in the country. He is the first player not ranked a 4-star in this group. I do think by this time next year, he's going to be a 4-star. I think that he does have the athletic traits and ability to have a ton of success at the next level, whether it is a receiver or another position. I mean, he's just a football player. That you can't teach the size, speed, and strength that he possesses. So he's another guy that I was looking at and he would have been my very next pick. So thank you for taking that, my friend. I see you get me back for the earlier one. I think we
think alike too much sometimes.
We do. Yeah, we do. There's a lot of guys I can go. There's a lot of players you can go with this next one, but I think I am going to roll with my guy from Timp View. Brian, I might need your help pronouncing his name. Asaya Galea.
Asaya Galei.
So I think Galei he's an absolute baller. I mean, this is a dude who, we're talking once again about versatility, an incredible athlete. When you're looking at what 24/7 Sports thinks of him, they have him as the 10th best player in the class. They have him as a safety, but he's a top 50 safety in the country still. So still an incredible safety, but he can do a little bit of everything. When you look at him, he's had over 400 yards receiving throughout his high school career, 13 total touchdowns, 8 this most recent year. And you're looking at what he does defensively, that's him rushing. So he could be a potent running back too. But then if you look at him defensively, 74 tackles, 3 sacks, 6 interceptions. And the size that he plays with, 6'1", 185, to be able to move and play in the back end at that size, that's where I could see him playing several spots on defense. But the one thing I know, Brian, is I want him to play on my defense in the next level.
Yeah, you do. And he's another one of those players that if you're watching, he catches your eye immediately. And I apologize. I say it's Isa. You're right. Oh. But Galei is one of those guys that just makes plays. And he's the kind of player that has a nose for the football, that knows where his instincts are just off the charts. And so he's one of those players that I think if you're a football fan, you want him on your team. I think his potential to go to the league with his frame and his athleticism is right there. He also would be a great win for this program, as he's in the backyard of your rival right now at Timp View High School. And you've done a good job of drawing in Timp View talent. I think that plays a factor in it. I love his game. I think he's special, both physically, but also I think his instincts and the way he plays, you don't see that from a lot of guys. I almost want to say dedication to the game, right? Like some guys have tremendous athletic ability, but it doesn't look like they know how to use it. He knows how to use it, and he puts it to work for him all the time. So good job by you. Great selection.
Well, thank you, sir. And we have a ton of players to get through, so we are going to keep our draft rolling and talk about the rest of the players in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks has your back. The big game is almost here, and there is no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winning awards, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less than on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. This week, I'm looking at my board and selecting, okay, is Travis Kelce going to have a big game? It's in the Super Bowl, right? Is he going to have more receiving yards? Or, hey, is Mahomes going to have a monster game? Am I going to go more his total? What's not to love? Fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promo tabs to tail any of the Super Sweat Millie winners, big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no space, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game today. Because it is your turn.
This one's a tough one. There are so many good.
Like we said in the open, right? Like, this has the chance to be one of, if not the best classes that Utah's ever seen. So it's a hard draft. It's hard to do.
And there are just so many good players out there.
Yeah. We're barely touching the guys who are committed. You talked about Bot a little bit, as well as offensive lineman from Corner Canyon, who I'm kicking myself that I just blanked on his name right now, Ian Taffa. But there are so many dudes in this class. We haven't mentioned Helaman Kasuga. He's going to go to Texas A&M. He lit the state on fire his freshman year at Timpview, now at Corner Canyon.
Yeah, and Kasuga, I'm not down on him at all. I just don't think that I think he's locked in at Texas A&M. I think the odds of Utah flipping him are slim to none. Also coming off a pretty significant injury. I'm going to stick to my board, though. Devaughn Eka.
Oh, nice. He was on my board, too. I was curious if you were going to have him.
Yeah, Devaughn Eka, I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Early on in his recruiting process, there were some questions about what his potential to play at the next level were going to be in terms of getting the academics on board and things of that nature. And he's cleaned all that stuff up, starting to get the offers. I think he's going to have a stellar season next year at Lehigh, and he's going to really pop off the page. That's a program that's on the rise as well. They've become one of the juggernauts of the state. So you're in great hands. You have the great Ed Larson did retire, but I think there's a lot of good foundation in that program still to continue the developmental stuff and everything like that. I just don't see a lot of players with Eka's explosive ability, his ability to do it in the run and the pass game, and his size. Even as a sophomore, you could see that he was built like a collegiate football player. He's a rare body and a rare breed, and there's a lot of options out there too. I thought of some of the Davis kids. I won't say any names just in case you decide to draft somebody. But he was one that just, as I've watched him, even since a freshman, I've just loved his game.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, 6.7 yards per carry last year, 15 total touchdowns, almost 1,300 all-purpose yards too a year ago. So just a tremendous talent. You mentioned the size thing. I think that will be what some people look at, but still 5'11", 185. He can produce. He's absolutely a guy I think Utah should look at, and I would hope that he does become a Utah Ute. This is one I think Utah does have a chance at too, because I think a lot of people are going to overlook him, Brian.
Yeah, 5'11", 185. I think it sounds a lot smaller than when you see him in person, right? Mm-hmm. He is rocked out for his size, and that doesn't mean like he doesn't have room to grow into that body. He still does. I think 20 pounds could go on him easily, but like by rocked out, I mean his frame is just built to be a running back. Thick hips, really stocked lower body, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of room to gain some weight if he needs to. But, given he's never shown any signs that it's too light at the high school level, the way he's dominated. He took over. He and Legend Glasker were two guys that basically took over for that Lehigh team at certain points during the season. And, I think Glasker is another one of those guys, a very under the radar recruit for 2026. But he's going to pop off this season as well. But Eka's the one to watch for sure.
Yeah, Eka was on my board too. Wasn't sure if you'd have him. Just like this is what we were talking about. Like we were talking about overlooking him. I thought you might overlook his size, and so I'm like, oh, he'll be on my board. I don't know if he'll have him. So we both think of the same way there. Excited to see what Eka can produce. We each got 2 draft picks left to make. Sake of time, we're going to combine them. So for my last 2, I'm going Kai Meza. Someone you mentioned a little bit earlier for Corner Canyon. You didn't take him though, so since he's still on the board, I'm going to scoop him up. Wide receiver out of Corner Canyon. Just a guy who, 944 yards last year, 12 touchdowns, tracks the ball well, makes great adjustments on it too. Just good speed, crafty route runner. this is a guy I definitely think is going to be making plays on Saturday in the near future. And for my finer pick, I am going to go with Junior Muwala, the Davis pass. I know. I figured you like traits too. I know we have that in common. So you're talking about a 6'4", 230-pound pass rusher. And look at his stats. I mean, 79 tackles, including 7 tackles for loss and 2 interceptions last year. And as a sophomore, he had 5.5 sacks over 10 games. I think this is a guy who's going to explode once he reaches the next level. So those are my last 2 picks. I apologize, but not really, for taking one of yours. So who are your final 2 picks going to be, my friend?
That's a tough one because you did take one of those guys off the board that I really, really like.
What do you like about Junior?
Size. He just has that prototypical Utah defensive tackle size, and he's still a young kid, but plays well within his body. Again, has the versatility to play out at a 5. He plays on the edge sometimes for Davis. Is an every down kind of kid. I don't think he's, you look at prospects, I think he's more like he didn't have like Haloti Ngata level abilities where you're just like, whoa. Mm-hmm. But similar to Dallas Vakalahi, right? Where you watch him and you're like, this kid has it. So good hands, great size, good get off on the ball. I think Utah. Don't want to mention the name. the one who joined the dark side. No, Keanu Kaunivasa, right? I don't think they necessarily have a hole to fill there. But as you're building to try to keep that position group filled, he's a guy that I look like would slot in well into that one. So for my final 2 picks, I'm gonna go.
A lot of good players on the board.
There are. So one that we've talked about a lot off air, Legend Glasker, wide receiver out of Lehigh. I'll take him for one. I think Legend is a kid that changed schools, had some issues at his prior school, ended up at Lehigh. He's in a great situation, balled out in the playoff, actually won them a game, almost won them the game against, I want to say it was Corner Canyon, but it was somebody else. So. Yeah. Someone else, anyways, he's a really talented 6'2", 175. Talk about Salesi Moa, very similar player in terms of ability to go get the ball, make big plays. By the end of the year, he was almost unguardable. And he's a player that I think that Utah can really get in early before everybody else comes to eat on him. The next one I think is one that you and I may have to discuss a little bit.
Okay.
And that is Tradon Bessinger.
Ooh, tell me what you like about the Davis Darts quarterback.
So that's the biggest thing, is I like that he's a Utah quarterback. And we've seen with the position at Utah that quarterback has been a little bit of a tricky burden. And so I think rather than always reaching outside the state to try and go get someone, come get a guy that's in state. Come get a guy who's going to stay with your program for 3 to 4 years. He is right there on that cusp of being a great G5, P4 quarterback. I love his accuracy. I love his toughness. I think he's highly athletic, more so than most people think. I think he's very advanced in terms of the processing and everything else. He just needs a little more polish. He's got a great group of skill players around him. Bodie Sparrow, who is a 2027 prospect that I think you and I both love as well. But I think Tradon Bessinger is that guy that you bet on right now, and he could potentially turn into a Jackson Dart style player.
43 passing touchdowns through rushing. Only
is that good?
5 picks. 3,670 yards, 306 a game. I agree. I think this is a guy that has to be at Utah. I think that's a great pick. And Glasker is another guy that I'm a big fan of too. Brian, there's so many guys that we didn't even get a chance to mention still. Who are the 3 honorable mentions you want to throw out there?
Oh, in terms of just guys across the strait, I think the Pula twins have to be mentioned, right? They're 2 very elite players. Jaron's a little bit better than Kenan in my opinion, but sometimes it's almost impossible to tell them apart. And they were absolutely critical for Timpview this season, and they showcase. So sometimes you hear about players before you get a chance to see them in person, and the hype gets to you a little bit, and you're like, all right, we'll see what this is really all about. When I watched them in person, I was like, wait a second. We're not hyping these guys up enough. We got to start selling this even more. That's how good the Pula twins are. There's a couple other names out there. The one that I'll kind of circle around, though, is Jackson Tawala, who I think struggled last year at West High because of some injuries, had a big shoulder issue. but I think he's primed for a very strong senior season. He's a legacy in the sense that his brother, Paul, was a center at Utah. Jackson's had the spotlight on his back for a long, long time. But I think there's a good reason for it. The athletic gifts are all there. I think he was in a good program last year for West High to really develop. I think this year will be a really strong opportunity for him to step forward and really focus on playing the position that he wants to play, which is wide receiver, as opposed to getting moved around a little bit, which he had in the past.
It's a great class in 2026, and it is an opportunity to be Utah's best ever if they can make the right plays, land the right type of guys, maybe even flip a player or two. We can't wait to see how it all shakes out. Bryan, always a blast when you join me, my friend. Thank you so much. You were the man. Make sure you guys head over and give Bryan Brown a follow at BrownBearSLC. Thanks again, Bryan.
Happy to be here.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics.